The room at Le Chateau went dead silent. A pin drop would have sounded like a gunshot. Jaden Thorne, the ruthless CEO of Thorne Dynamics, held a gold fountain pen hovering over a contract worth $4 billion. Across from him sat his oldest friend and business partner, smiling like a predator who had just trapped its prey. But before the ink could touch the paper, a trembling hand placed a glass of water on the table, and a soft, shaky voice shattered the tension. "Don't sign that," the waitress whispered. "Page 14 will ruin you." What happened next didn't just change the deal, it destroyed an empire. This is the story of Emia Vance, and the night she risked her life to save a billionaire who didn't even know her name. The scent of Le Chateau was always the same: truffle oil, aged mahogany, and old money. It was a smell that stuck to Emia Vance's uniform long after her shift ended, a reminder of a world she could touch but never truly enter. Emia adjusted her apron in the reflection of the brass espresso machine. At 24, she had the tired eyes of someone twice her age. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe bun, mandated by management, and her hands were chapped from polishing silverware until it gleamed like diamonds. To the patrons of Le Chateau, the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan, she wasn't a person. She was a ghost, a pair of floating hands that delivered Wagyu beef and refilled crystal flutes of Dom Perignon. "Table 4 is yours tonight, Vance," the floor manager, Henri, snapped, pointing a manicured finger toward the private alcove in the back. "And don't mess it up. We have Jaden Thorne coming in." Emia's stomach tightened. Jaden Thorne. The name was synonymous with power. The CEO of Thorne Dynamics, a man who moved markets with a single tweet. He was known as the Iron Wolf of Wall Street, cold, calculating, and utterly unforgiving. "Who is he with?" Emia asked, her voice low. "Michael Sterling," Henry replied, checking his watch. "His CFO and childhood friend. They're closing the acquisition of the Solaris Tech Group tonight. It's a $4 billion merger. If you drop so much as a spoon, Emia, you're not just fired, you're blacklisted from every restaurant in the city." Emia nodded, swallowing her anxiety. She needed this job. The medical bills for her mother's dialysis were piling up on the kitchen counter of their cramped Queen's apartment like snowdrifts. She couldn't afford a mistake. She made her way to table 4, checking the setting. The tablecloth was blindingly white. The cutlery was heavy silver. It was a stage set for a play where millions of dollars would change hands. At 8:00 p.m. sharp, the heavy oak doors swung open. The air in the restaurant seemed to shift. Jaden Thorne walked in. He was taller in person, possessing a kinetic energy that made the air around him hum. He wore a bespoke navy suit that probably cost more than Emia made in 3 years. His eyes were the color of steel, sharp and scanning the room for threats. Beside him walked Michael Sterling, shorter, softer, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Michael looked like a man trying too hard to appear relaxed. "Right this way, Monsieur Thorne," Henri said, bowing lower than usual. Emia stood by the alcove, hands clasped behind her back, making herself as small as possible. As Jaden passed her, he didn't even blink. To him, she was furniture. They sat. The tension was immediate. "Champagne to start, Jaden?" Michael asked, signaling Emia without looking at her. "To celebrate. It's been a long 6 months getting Solaris to the table." "Scotch," Jaden said, his voice a deep baritone that vibrated in Emia's chest. "Neat." "Macallan 25. I'll celebrate when the ink is dry, Michael." Emia moved forward. "Right away, sir." Jaden glanced up. For a split second, their eyes locked. He looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep weariness that money couldn't cure. Then the mask of the CEO slid back into place, and he looked away. "Bring the bottle," Michael added, his tone clipped. As Amaya retreated to the bar, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had served hundreds of business dinners. Usually there was an air of camaraderie, or at least professional respect. But between these two men, lifelong friends, according to the tabloids, there was a razor-thin wire of hostility. She returned with the drinks, moving with the practiced silence of a cat. As she poured the amber liqueur, she began to listen. It was a habit she had picked up during her 2 years in law school, before her father died, and the money ran out, forcing her to drop out and pick up an apron. She knew how to listen to what wasn't being said. "The board is anxious, Jaden," Michael was saying, swirling his drink. "They want this done tonight. The Solaris patents are crucial for the next quarter." "I know what the board wants," Jaden snapped, "but the valuation seems inflated. Solaris has been bleeding cash for 2 years. Why are we paying a 30% premium?" "Because of the AI architecture," Michael insisted, his voice rising slightly in pitch. "It's proprietary. If we don't buy it, Google will." "Trust me, Jaden. I've gone over the due diligence myself. It's clean. Trust me." Emir froze for a microsecond. In her law classes, they learned about tells. Michael was tapping his ring against the base of his glass. Tap, tap, tap. A nervous tick. She finished pouring and stepped back into the shadows, but she didn't leave the alcove. She stood by the service station, ostensibly polishing a wine glass, but her ears were tuned to table 4. Something about the way Michael said, "It's clean," sounded dirty. By the time the main course arrived, filet mignon for Jaden, sea bass for Michael, the mood had darkened. A leather briefcase sat on the table between them, an unwelcome third diner. Michael popped the latches. The sound echoed in the quiet alcove. He pulled out a thick stack of documents, bound with a heavy clip. "The final agreement," Michael said, sliding it across the white tablecloth. "Legal sent it over an hour ago. Standard boilerplate, mostly. Just the updated acquisition price and the stock swap details we discussed." Jaden picked up the document. He put on a pair of reading glasses, transforming from a warrior into a scholar. He began to read, flipping pages with a rhythmic swish. Emir stepped forward to refill their water glasses. She moved slowly, her eyes darting to the paper. She knew she shouldn't look. If Henry saw her reading a guest's documents, she would be fired on the spot. But the paralegal in her brain was screaming. She saw the header. Acquisition agreement between Thorn Dynamics and Solaris Tech. Jaden was skimming. He was tired. He was relying on Michael. "Section 4 looks standard," Jaden muttered, taking a sip of scotch. "Retention of key staff." Yes, Michael said, waving a hand dismissively. "We keep their CTO for 2 years. It's all there." Michael was sweating. It was a cool 68 degrees in the restaurant, but a bead of perspiration trickled down his temple. He kept glancing at the door, then at Jaden's pen. "Just sign it, Jaden," Michael said, a forced laugh escaping his lips. "Then we can order the soufflé and go home richer men." Jaden flipped to the back. "Where is the liability clause? I want to make sure we aren't inheriting their pending lawsuits." "Page 12, Michael said quickly. "Paragraph 3. Indemnification is capped at 10 million. It's nothing." Jaden flipped to page 12. He nodded, satisfied. He flipped to the signature page. He uncapped his fountain pen. The gold nib glinted under the chandelier light. Emir was hovering behind Jaden's left shoulder, filling his water glass. Her eyes caught the text on the page opposite the signature page. Page 14. It was a misc provisions page, usually where lawyers hid boring definitions, but a specific phrase caught her eye. It was buried in a block of text, single-spaced, font size 10. Notwithstanding the foregoing, the acquiring party, Thorn Dynamics, hereby assumes full personal liability for all undisclosed debt obligations of the target company, Solaris Tech, including the Project Ether offshore liabilities, estimated at $850,000. Emia's heart stopped. Personal liability, not corporate liability, personal, and Project Ether. She remembered reading about Project Ether in a financial blog weeks ago. It was a shell company scandal involving toxic assets in the Cayman Islands. If Thorn Dynamics absorbed that debt, it would be bad. But if Jayden assumed personal liability, it would wipe him out. He would lose his company, his homes, his reputation. He would be bankrupt. And Michael was pushing him to sign. Michael knew. Michael was dumping the toxic debt onto Jayden personally. It was a coup, a betrayal of Shakespearean proportions. Emia's hand trembled. The water pitcher clinked against the glass. Jayden didn't notice. He lowered the pen to the paper. "Here we go," Jayden sighed. "To the future." "To the future," Michael whispered, his eyes hungry. Emia looked at the pen. She looked at Michael's predatory grin. She looked at the door where Henri was watching her. If she spoke, she lost her job. She lost the money for her mother's medicine. She would be a pariah. If she stayed silent, this man would be destroyed by his best friend. The tip of the pen touched the paper. A small dot of ink appeared on the signature line. Emia closed her eyes, took a breath, and made the worst decision of her life. "Don't sign that." The voice was barely a whisper, but in the silence of the alcove, it sounded like a scream. Jayden's hand froze. The pen didn't move. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. Michael's head snapped up, his eyes widening in shock, then instantly narrowing into rage. "Excuse me," he hissed. Jayden slowly lifted the pen from the paper. He turned in his chair, looking up at the waitress standing behind him. He saw a young woman in a stained apron, her face pale, her hands trembling so hard the water pitcher was creating ripples. "What did you say?" Jayden asked. His voice wasn't angry yet. It was confused. Emia's throat felt like it was filled with sand. She gripped the pitcher tighter. "I said, don't sign that, sir." Michael slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "You insolent little—" "Henri, get over here." Henri, having seen the commotion, was already sprinting across the dining room. "Mr. Thorn, Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry," Henri gasped, grabbing Emia's arm hard enough to bruise. "She is leaving immediately. Vance, get to the kitchen. You're done." "Get her out of here," Michael snarled, his face turning a blotchy red. "And I want her name. I'll have her arrested for harassment." "Wait." The single word from Jayden stopped Henry in his tracks. Jayden hadn't looked at Michael. He was still looking at Emia. His eyes were drilling into hers, searching for something. "Why?" "Jayden, don't listen to the help," Michael said, his voice cracking with panic. "She's probably high. Look at her." "Why?" Jayden repeated, his voice harder this time. He ignored his friend. "You warned me." "Why?" Emia pulled her arm from Henry's grip. She knew she was fired. She had nothing left to lose. She stepped forward, reached over the billionaire's shoulder, and pointed a shaking finger at the document. "Page 14, she said, her voice gaining a fraction more strength. "Paragraph 2, line 5. The Project Ether clause." The color drained from Michael Sterling's face. It happened instantly, like a curtain dropping. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. Jayden frowned. He flipped the page back. He adjusted his glasses. He read the line she pointed to. He read it once. He read it twice. The silence that followed was terrifying. It wasn't the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of a bomb counting down. Jayden lowered the paper. He took off his glasses and placed them gently on the table. He didn't scream. He didn't flip the table. He simply turned his head slowly to look at Michael. "Personal liability," Jayden said softly. "For $850 million of toxic debt." "Jayden, Michael stammered. "I didn't see that. It must be a drafting error. Legal must have—" "You drafted this, Michael," Jayden said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I recognize the formatting. You wrote this." "It's a mistake," Michael shouted, standing up. "You're going to take the word of a waitress over mine? I've been your partner for 20 years. Jayden looked at the contract, then at the pen in his hand. "A waitress who apparently reads contract law better than my CFO," Jayden said. He stood up. He was 6'3", and suddenly he loomed over the table like a skyscraper. He picked up the contract. "Rai-P!" The sound of the thick paper tearing echoed through the entire restaurant. Diners at other tables turned to look. Jayden tore the $4 billion deal in half, then in quarters. He dropped the confetti onto Michael's plate of unfinished sea bass. "Get out," Jayden said. "Jayden, please. Get out." The voice was a growl now. "Before I kill you right here in front of the creme brulee." Michael scrambled back, knocking his chair over. He looked at Amaya with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You're dead," he mouthed at her. "You hear me? You're dead." He fled the restaurant. Jayden stood there, his chest heaving slightly. The entire restaurant was staring. Henry was trembling, looking between Jayden and Emia, terrified to speak. Jayden turned to Emia. For the first time, he really saw her. He saw the intelligence behind the fear. "What is your name?" he asked. "Emia. Emia Vance." "Well, Emia Vance," Jayden said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a business card, heavy black metal with gold lettering. He placed it in her hand. "You just saved my life, and you just lost your job." "I know," she whispered. "Be at this address tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., Jayden said. "Don't be late." He threw a stack of $100 bills onto the table, enough to cover the meal 10 times over, and walked out without looking back. Emia stood alone in the center of the room. Henri glared at her. "Get your things, Vance," Henri spat. "You're fired." She untied her apron. Her hands were still shaking, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a ghost. She felt like she had just started a war. The Thorn Dynamics Tower pierced the Manhattan skyline like a shard of black obsidian. It was 50 stories of glass, steel, and intimidation. At 7:55 a.m., Amaya Vance stood at the foot of the building. She wasn't wearing her waitress uniform anymore. She wore her only suit, a charcoal grey ensemble bought 3 years ago for moot court tryouts. It was slightly tight in the shoulders and frayed at the hem, but she had spent an hour lint rolling it until it looked presentable. Her hair was down, framing a face that was pale with lack of sleep. She hadn't slept. She had spent the night staring at the ceiling of her queen's apartment, listening to her mother's labored breathing in the next room, wondering if she had made a fatal mistake. She had humiliated a powerful man. Michael Sterling wouldn't just let that go. She pushed through the revolving doors. The lobby was a cathedral of capitalism, marble floors, soaring ceilings, and a security desk that looked like the bridge of a starship. "Name?" the security guard asked, not looking up from his monitor. "Amir Vance. I'm here to see Mr. Thorne." The guard looked up. He scanned her worn shoes, her cheap bag, her nervous posture. He smirked. "Mr. Thorne? Does he know you?" "He told me to come at 8 a.m. The guard chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "Listen, honey, We get 3 of you a week. Mr. Thorne sent for me. I have his baby. It's pathetic. Turn around before I call NYPD for trespassing." "Check the list," Amaya said, her voice steady despite the rapid thumping of her heart. "You're not on the list. Call his office." "I'm not disturbing the CEO's executive assistant for a walk-in. Leave. Now." Emia's hands balled into fists. She had faced eviction notices, medical debt collectors, and rude diners. She wasn't going to be stopped by a rent-a-cop. "If you don't call up," Amia said, leaning over the desk, "you are going to be the one explaining to Jaden Thorne why his 8 a.m. appointment is standing in the lobby. And considering he fired his CFO last night, I don't think he's in a forgiving mood." The guard hesitated. The specificity of the CFO comment made him pause. The news of Michael Sterling's exit hadn't hit the press yet, but rumors fly fast in a building like this. He picked up the phone. He dialed. He whispered. His face went pale. He hung up and looked at Amaya with wide eyes. "Top floor. Private elevator. Keycard access only. I'll unlock it for you." As the elevator shot upward, Emir's ears popped. The doors opened directly into a sprawling office that looked more like a penthouse. The view of Central Park was breathtaking, but the atmosphere inside was suffocating. People in expensive suits were running around like ants in a kicked hill. Phones were ringing. Someone was shouting about damage control. In the center of the storm stood Jaden Thorne. He was in shirt sleeves, his tie undone, staring at a bank of monitors displaying stock tickers. He looked worse than he had the night before. Dark circles under his eyes, a shadow of stubble on his jaw. "Clear the room," Jaden said. He didn't shout, but his voice cut through the noise instantly. The assistants and junior executives froze. "Everyone out. 5 minutes," Jaden commanded. They scrambled for the exits, casting curious, judgmental glances at Emir as they brushed past her. Within 30 seconds they were alone. Jaden turned to her. "You're punctual. I like that." "I need a job, Mr. Thorne," Emir said, skipping the pleasantries. "And I need health insurance. My mother has kidney failure. If I don't have coverage by the end of the week, her treatment stops." Jaden blinked. The raw honesty seemed to surprise him. Straight to the point. "No nice to meet you. No, wow, nice office?" "I don't have time for small talk, and frankly, neither do you. Your stock is down 4% in pre-market trading." Jaden looked at the screen. "News leaked that the Solaris deal is dead. The market hates uncertainty. But that's not my biggest problem." He walked over to his desk and picked up a file. "My biggest problem is that I have a board of directors meeting in 48 hours where they are going to try to oust me as CEO. Michael has been busy." "Michael?" He's spinning a narrative. He's telling the board that I've lost my mind, that I tanked a $4 billion merger because of, and I quote, "the paranoid delusions of a hallucinating waitress." Jaden threw the file on the desk. He's saying, "I'm mentally unfit to lead." Emir felt a cold chill. He's gaslighting you. He's good at it. Michael and I built this company. He knows where every skeleton is buried because he helped bury them. If I can't prove that the Solaris deal was toxic by Thursday afternoon, the board will vote me out. I lose my company. You lose your new job. "So, what do you want me to do?" "I verified your background," Jaden said, tapping a tablet. "Amaya Vance, Columbia Law, top 5% of your class, editor of the Law Review. You dropped out in your final year." "My father died," Amaya said quietly. "Life insurance didn't pay out. Mum got sick. I had to work." "A tragedy," Jaden said, not unkindly, "but a waste of a brilliant mind. Last night, you spotted a liability clause that my entire legal team missed." "Why?" "Because they were looking for what was there. Emia said. "I was looking for the trap. When you're poor, Mr. Thorne, you learn that contracts are usually weapons designed to hurt you. You read the fine print, because the fine print is where they hide the knife." Jaden nodded slowly. "I need that. I am surrounded by yes men. People who tell me what I want to hear because they want their bonuses. Michael used that blindness against me. I need someone who assumes everyone is lying. I need a personal legal consultant, independent of the general counsel. You answer only to me." "And the pay?" $200,000 a year, full benefits effective immediately, plus a bonus if we survive Thursday. Emia's knees almost gave out. It was more money than she had ever seen. It was salvation. "I'll take it." "Good," Jaden said. He pointed to a stack of boxes in the corner. "Those are the raw due diligence files from Solaris. Not the summaries Michael gave me, the raw data. Thousands of emails, invoices, and ledgers. Somewhere in there is the proof that Michael knew about the toxic debt." "Find it." "Mr. Thorne," Emia said, walking toward the boxes. "I won't just find it. I'll nail him to the wall with it." Jaden watched her go, a flicker of hope sparking in his grey eyes. "I hope so, Emia. Because if you don't, we're both finished." For the next 12 hours, Emia Vance ceased to be a human being and became a machine. She set up a war room in a small conference room adjoining Jaden's office. She spread documents across the mahogany table, creating a physical map of the Solaris Tech financial structure. She drank 4 espressos. She didn't eat. Jaden came in and out, fielding angry calls from investors, but he let her work. He sensed that she was in a trance, the flow state that only obsessive lawyers achieve. By 8 p.m., her eyes were burning, but a pattern was emerging. Project Ether wasn't just a bad investment, it was a laundering scheme. Solaris Tech had been paying exorbitant consulting fees to a shell company in the Cayman Islands called Ether Holdings. The invoices were vague. Strategic implementation, cloud architecture review. Millions of dollars a month, flowing out of Solaris and into the void. But that wasn't the smoking gun. The smoking gun was the signature on the counterparty invoices. It was a digital signature, encrypted, but the metadata stamp had a time zone. EST, New York. He got sloppy, Emia whispered to herself. She traced the IP address of the invoice generation. It routed through a VPN, but the VPN had a momentary lapse in a log file from 6 months ago. It resolved to a residential address in the Upper East Side, 15 Central Park West, Penthouse B. Emia froze. She knew that address. She had seen it on the invitation list for Jaden's private birthday party last year at the restaurant. It wasn't Michael's apartment. It was the home of Evelyn Vane, the chairwoman of the board of Thorne Dynamics. Emia felt sick. It wasn't just Michael. Michael was the executioner, but Evelyn Vane, the woman who had mentored Jaden, the matriarch of the company, was the architect. She was siphoning money from Solaris, and she needed Thorne Dynamics to buy Solaris to cover the tracks before Solaris went bankrupt and the auditors came looking. If Jaden signed the deal, the debt would be absorbed, the audit trails buried, and Evelyn would be $4 billion richer. Emia grabbed the papers and ran toward Jaden's office, but the office was empty. "Where is he?" Emia asked the executive assistant, a young man named David who looked terrified. He left," David stammered. "Mr. Sterling came back with security, and the police." "The police?" "They served Mr. Thorne with a restraining order, and they served him with a suspension notice from the board. He's been barred from the building until the vote on Thursday." "Where did he go?" "He went home." "But Emia..." David lowered his voice. "You need to leave. Michael knows you're here. He's coming up the elevator." Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in Emia's chest. She had the evidence that implicated the chairwoman and the CFO. If Michael found her here, he wouldn't just fire her. He would destroy the evidence. "Give me your flash drive," Emiya ordered. "What? Give it to me!" David fumbled in his pocket and handed her a USB drive. Emiya jammed it into her laptop, copying the key files, the IP logs, the invoices, the signature match. 99% complete. The elevator dinged. 100%. Emiya yanked the drive out, shoved her laptop into her bag, and scanned the room. There was only one other way out, the service stairwell used by the cleaning crews. She heard Michael's voice in the reception area. "I want every piece of paper in that conference room shredded. And find the girl, she's trespassing." Emiya slipped out the side door, just as Michael burst into the main office. She took the stairs 2 at a time, her heels clicking on the concrete. She didn't stop at the lobby. She went all the way down to the loading dock. She burst out into the cool night air of a back alley, gasping for breath. She hailed a taxi on 5th Avenue, her hands shaking so badly she dropped her phone twice. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Queens," she said automatically. Then she stopped. If they knew who she was, they knew where she lived. Michael had hired a private investigator to check her background. Jayden had told her that. They knew about her sick mother. Going home was the most dangerous thing she could do. "No," Emiya said. "Take me to Tribeca. 44 North Moore Street." Jayden's home address. It was on the contact sheet David had left on her desk. She had to get to Jayden. She had the bullet that could kill the conspiracy, but she had to get it to him before Michael got to her. The taxi ride felt like an eternity. Every siren made Emiya jump. When she arrived at Jayden's loft building, a converted warehouse that oozed industrial chic, she didn't buzz the intercom. She called the number on the business card Jayden had given her. He picked up on the first ring. "Emiya, where are you? They locked me out of the system." "I'm downstairs," she said. "Let me in. I know who is behind Ether." The buzz of the door lock was his answer. Jayden's apartment was dark, illuminated only by the city lights outside the massive windows. He looked like a caged animal, pacing the floor with a glass of scotch in hand. When Emiya told him about Evelyn Vane, he went silent. He sank onto his leather sofa, the glass dangling from his fingers. "Evelyn," he whispered. "She was my father's partner. I spent Christmas with her. She's stealing from Solaris, and she used Michael to get you to buy the debt so she could cash out," Emiya said, plugging the USB drive into Jayden's secure server. "Here's the proof. The IP traced directly to her penthouse." Jayden stared at the screen. The betrayal was etched on his face. It was a deeper wound than the money. It was family. "We have them," Jayden said, his voice hardening. "We go to the board meeting on Thursday. We present this. They go to prison." "It's not that simple," Emiya said. "They suspended you. You can't get into the meeting. I'm the CEO. I have a right to be heard. Not if they file an injunction claiming you're mentally unstable, and that's exactly what Michael is doing right now." Emiya pulled up a news alert on her phone. Breaking. Thorne Dynamics, CEO Jayden Thorne placed on leave following mental breakdown at upscale restaurant. The article cited anonymous sources claiming Jayden had been hallucinating and screaming at invisible enemies. "They are painting you as crazy," Emiya said. "If you show up screaming about a conspiracy involving the chairwoman, you'll just prove their point. They won't even look at the evidence. They'll have security drag you out." Jayden smashed his glass into the fireplace. It shattered with a violent crash. "So what do we do? Just let them win?" Emir looked at the Billionaire, then at the scattered files. She thought about the restaurant. She thought about how people treated waitresses, like they were invisible, like they were furniture. An idea began to form, a crazy, desperate, dangerous idea. "They won't let you in," Emir said slowly, "and they won't let your lawyers in. But the meeting is catered, isn't it?" Jaden looked at her, confused. "What?" "Yes. Le Chateau is catering the board lunch. They always do." Emir smiled, but it was a cold, sharp smile. "Michael got me fired from Le Chateau. But he didn't fire the rest of the staff. And Henri owes me a favor, because I know he's been skimming tips from the waiters for 3 years. "Emir," Jaden said, stepping closer. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," she said, "that if we can't walk through the front door, we come in through the kitchen. I can get back into the service team. I can get into that room. It's too dangerous. If Michael sees you—" "He won't see me," Emir said. "He never saw me. Even when I was standing right next to him pouring his wine, he never looked at my face. To men like him, people like me don't exist. I'm going to use that invisibility." "And the evidence?" "I'll tape the drive under a serving platter," Emir said. "I'll deliver it right to the center of the table, but we need a distraction. We need something that forces them to look at the screen before they can stop it." Jaden's eyes narrowed. He was beginning to see the plan. "I can hack the boardroom projector remotely. But I need a physical bridge. Someone has to plug a transmitter into the HDMI port on the table." "I can do that," Emir said, "while I'm serving the coffee." "If you get caught," Jaden said gravely, "Michael won't just fire you. He'll frame you for the hacking. You'll go to federal prison." Emir thought of her mother. She thought of the hospital bills. She thought of the look on Michael's face when he called her insolent. "I'm already in the fire, Jaden," she said. "Let's burn the whole house down." Thursday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. Rain lashed against the windows of Le Chateau, matching the storm brewing inside Emir's stomach. She stood in the service alley behind the restaurant, water soaking through her coat. She waited until Henri stepped out for his morning cigarette. When the door clicked open, Henri froze. He saw Emir standing in the rain, looking not like a fired waitress, but like a woman possessed. "You," Henri hissed, flicking ash nervously. "If Michael sees you here, he will burn this place down. Go away." "I need to work the board lunch today, Henri," Emir said, her voice cutting through the sound of the rain. "Are you insane? You are blacklisted. I replaced you." "You're going to unreplace me," Emir said. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Or I'm going to tell the owners about the spillage logs." Henri's face went grey. The spillage logs were his private scam, marking expensive bottles of wine as broken or spilled, then selling them out the back door. It was a felony that would land him in jail. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "Try me. I have nothing left to lose, Henri. Put me on the shift. Put me in the boardroom, and I never saw anything." Henri stared at her for a long moment, the rain dripping from his nose. Then he cursed under his breath and opened the door. "Get a uniform. Keep your head down. If you get caught, I never saw you." 2 hours later, Emir was inside the lion's den. The Thorn Dynamics boardroom was a masterpiece of intimidation. A 40-foot table of black walnut dominated the room. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced men. At the head of the table sat Evelyn Vane, the chairwoman, looking like a queen spider in a silk blouse. To her right sat Michael Sterling, looking triumphant. The rest of the board, 12 powerful men and women, were taking their seats. The air was thick with tension. "The agenda is simple," Evelyn announced, her voice cool and crisp. "A vote of no confidence in Jaden Thorne. His erratic behavior has endangered this company. We must remove him to stabilize the stock." Emia stood by the sideboard, adjusting a tray of crystal water pitchers. She wore the uniform, black vest, white shirt, hair pulled back tight. She wore heavy glasses she had bought at a pharmacy to obscure her face. "Coffee service," Henry muttered into her earpiece. "Go." Emia moved. She focused on her breathing. Inhale. Exhale. She had to become the ghost again. She moved around the table, pouring coffee. She stopped behind Michael. He was laughing at a joke Evelyn had made. He didn't even turn his head as Emia filled his cup. She was an inch away from him. She could smell his expensive cologne, a scent that masked the rot underneath. He doesn't see me, she thought. He sees a uniform. She moved to the head of the table. Underneath the massive teleconferencing screen was the control console. The HDMI port was there, a small black mouth waiting to be fed. "More cream, Madam Chairwoman?" Emia asked softly. "Yes," Evelyn said, not looking up from her notes. "And be quick about it." Emia placed the creamer on the table. With her other hand, shielded by the bulk of the coffee pot, she reached into her apron pocket. She palmed the small black transmitter Jaden had built. It was the size of a stick of gum. She leaned forward to wipe a non-existent spot of water from the table. Her hand brushed the console. Click. The transmitter slotted into the HDMI port. It was done. "Thank you," Evelyn said dismissively. Emia stepped back, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She retreated to the wall, standing perfectly still. "Let's proceed," Michael said, standing up. "Jaden isn't here to defend himself, which speaks volumes. He is mentally unwell. The Solaris deal was the future of this company, and he torched it because of a hallucination. I moved to strip him of his CEO title immediately." "Seconded," a board member said. "All in favor?" Evelyn asked, raising her hand. Hands began to go up around the table. 1, 2, 5, 10. It was over. They were voting him out. Emia touched her earpiece. She tapped it 3 times. The signal, now. Jaden, now. The air inside the Thorne Dynamics boardroom was recycled, cold, and smelled faintly of lemon polish and impending execution. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the Manhattan skyline into a grey, weeping blur. But inside, the atmosphere was as arid as a desert. Emia Vance moved through the room like a shadow. Her heart was hammering against her ribs with such violence, she was terrified the sound would echo off the mahogany walls. She kept her head bowed, her eyes hidden behind the thick, smudged lenses of the pharmacy glasses. She gripped the silver handle of the coffee pot so tightly her knuckles were white. She was no longer Emia Vance, the law student who had lost everything. She was just the help, a non-entity, a piece of moving furniture. At the head of the 40-foot table sat Evelyn Vane. The chairwoman looked every inch the predator, her silver hair coiffed into a helmet of authority, her eyes scanning the room with bored detachment. To her right sat Michael Sterling. He was vibrating with nervous energy, tapping a gold pen against his leather notebook. He looked like a man who had gotten away with murder and was just waiting for the insurance check to clear. "The agenda is simple," Evelyn announced, her voice slicing through the silence. "We are here to stabilize the company. Jaden's behavior at Le Chateau was not just an embarrassment. It was a liability. The stock is down 8% since Tuesday. The market smells blood." Emia stepped up to the sideboard. The console for the teleconferencing system was embedded in the table, right next to Evelyn's elbow. It was the nerve center of the room, connected to the massive 85-inch screen on the far wall. It was also 5 feet away from the man who had fired her. Coffee service, Henry had whispered in her earpiece moments ago. You have 30 seconds before they lock the doors. Emaya took a breath that tasted of fear. She moved. She poured coffee for the board member at the far end of the table, then the next. She worked her way up the line, a rhythmic, invisible dance. Pour, step, pour, step. She reached Michael. He was laughing at something Evelyn had whispered. The sound was wet and unpleasant. Emia froze for a microsecond. She was close enough to stab him with a steak knife. She was close enough to scream the truth into his face, but she did neither. She filled his porcelain cup, the dark liquid swirling near the rim. Careful, Michael snapped, not even looking at her, pulling his cuff away. Don't drip. Apologies, sir, Emia whispered, her voice rough and unrecognizable. She moved to Evelyn. This was it. The HDMI port was a small black rectangle waiting to be fed. More cream, Madame Chairwoman? Emaya asked. Evelyn didn't look up from her dossier. Yes, and be quick about it. We're about to vote. Emia reached for the creamer with her left hand. With her right, shielded by the bulk of her apron and the coffee pot, she reached into her pocket. She palmed the device, a small, black transmitter Jaden had soldered together in his loft at 3:30 a.m. It felt hot in her hand. She leaned forward to place the cream on the table. Her hip brushed the edge of the table. Her right hand darted out like a striking cobra. Click. The sound was tiny, no louder than a pen clicking, but in the silence of the room, it sounded like a gunshot. Evelyn's head snapped up. She looked at the table. She looked at the console. Then she looked at Emia. For a terrifying second, their eyes met. Evelyn's gaze was sharp, intelligent, and suspicious. She saw the glasses. She saw the trembling hand. "Do I know you?" Evelyn asked, her eyes narrowing. Emia's blood ran cold. "I'm new, ma'am. First shift." Evelyn stared at her for a heartbeat longer, then dismissed her with a wave of her hand. "Go. Get out." Emia stepped back, retreating to the wall, her legs feeling like jelly. She touched her earpiece. "It's in." "Let's proceed," Michael said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. He projected a voice of sorrowful duty. "Jaden isn't here to defend himself, which speaks volumes. He is mentally unwell. The Solaris deal was the future of this company, and he torched it because of a hallucination. I move to strip him of his CEO title immediately." "Seconded," a board member said from the left. "All in favor?" Evelyn asked, raising her hand. It was a domino effect. 1 hand, 2, 5. The board members looked at each other, shrugged, and raised their hands. They were sheep following the wolves. 10 hands, 11. It was over. They had the majority. Emia reached up to her ear. She tapped the plastic casing 3 times. "Now, Jaden. Burn it down." Suddenly, the massive screen at the end of the room, which had been displaying a stagnant graph of the company's falling stock, convulsed. A screech of audio feedback tore through the room, high-pitched and painful. The board members winced, covering their ears. "What is that?" Evelyn shouted, slamming her hand on the table. "Tech support, cut the feed." But the feed didn't cut. The screen went black for a second, then flared to life with grainy, high-contrast footage. It wasn't a corporate presentation. It was a security camera feed. The timestamp in the corner read October 14th, 11:42 p.m. The location tag read Penthouse B, 15 Central Park West. The room went deadly silent. Everyone recognized the location. It was Evelyn Vane's living room. On the screen, 2 figures were sitting on a plush velvet sofa, sharing a bottle of vintage wine. The resolution was clear enough to see the sweat on Michael Sterling's forehead and the triumphant smirk on Evelyn Vane's lips. The audio kicked in, booming through the boardroom's surround sound speakers. "The Cayman accounts are ready, Evelyn," the on-screen Michael said, his voice unmistakable. Project Ether is fully funded. We just need to bleed Solaris dry for a few more months." In the boardroom, the real Michael Sterling turned the color of ash. He stood frozen, staring at his own digital ghost. "And Jayden?" the on-screen Evelyn asked, swirling her wine. "He's clueless," Michael laughed. It was a cruel, mocking sound. "He trusts me. I'm his brother, remember? I'll draft the acquisition. Thorn Dynamics buys the debt. We cash out the Cayman accounts. Jayden takes the fall if the SEC ever looks too closely. He's the signer. We're just the advisors." "Good," Evelyn said, clinking her glass against his. "To the perfect crime, and to the end of the Boy King." The video froze on that frame. The toast, the betrayal frozen in 4K resolution. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. 12 board members slowly turned their heads from the screen to the head of the table. They looked at Evelyn and Michael with a mixture of horror and realization. Evelyn Vane gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles straining against her skin. She looked like a cornered rat. This is a deep fake," she screamed, her composure shattering. "This is AI generated. It's a fabrication. Jayden is trying to frame us because he's insane." "It's not a deep fake, Evelyn." The voice came from the back of the room. It was deep, calm, and resonated with absolute authority. The double mahogany doors swung open with a crash. Jayden Thorne walked in. He wasn't wearing the bespoke suit of a CIO. He was wearing dark jeans, a soaked t-shirt, and a leather jacket. He looked like he had walked through a hurricane to get there. His hair was wet, his eyes were blazing, and he radiated a dangerous kinetic energy. Flanking him were 4 agents in blue windbreakers, emblazoned with 3 yellow letters: FBI. "The video is real," Jayden said, walking toward the table. "And so are the bank transfers. And so are the IP logs that link those Cayman accounts directly to the router in your penthouse." Michael tried to run. It was a pathetic, desperate attempt. He scrambled toward the side door, knocking over his chair. "Michael Sterling!" one of the agents shouted. "Federal agents! Stop!" Michael froze as an agent grabbed his arm and spun him around. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed through the room. "Jayden, wait!" Michael pleaded, tears streaming down his face. I was forced. She made me do it. I did it for the company." Jayden stopped in front of him. He looked at his childhood friend with eyes devoid of pity. "No, Michael, you didn't do it for the company, and you certainly didn't do it for me." Jayden turned to Evelyn. She hadn't moved. She sat in her chair, staring straight ahead, her empire crumbling around her. An agent placed a hand on her shoulder. "Evelyn Vane," the agent said, "you are under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud." As they were led out, the boardroom erupted into chaos. Directors were shouting, making calls to their lawyers, trying to distance themselves from the blast zone. "Order!" Jayden shouted. "Quiet!" The room fell silent. The board members looked at him with fear. They had just voted to fire him. They knew their heads were next on the chopping block. But Jayden didn't look at them. He turned his back on the board. He looked across the room to the shadows near the wall where the coffee service was set up. He looked at the trembling waitress with the glasses and the tight bun. He walked over to her. The entire room watched in confusion as the billionaire approached the server. Jayden stopped in front of her. He reached out and gently took the coffee pot from her shaking hands. He placed it on the table. "You missed a spot," Jayden said, a small, genuine smile breaking through his anger. He pointed to a drop of coffee on the tablecloth. Emia took off the heavy glasses. Her eyes were wet, but she stood tall. "I'll try to do better next time, sir." "There won't be a next time," Jayden said. He turned back to the board. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jayden announced, his voice ringing out, I am dissolving the office of the CFO. I am also dissolving the office of the chairwoman. Effective immediately, I am appointing a new chief strategy officer. Her name is Emia Vance." A collective gasp went through the room. "A waitress?" a board member scoffed, finding his voice. "Jayden, be serious. The stock is tanking. We need experience." "Experience?" Jayden laughed darkly. "My experienced CFO just tried to steal $4 billion. This waitress?" He put a hand on Emia's shoulder. "This waitress just saved this company from bankruptcy. She saved all of you from being accessories to a federal crime. She possesses more integrity and intelligence in her little finger than this entire board has shown in a decade." Jayden looked around the room, daring anyone to challenge him. "She is the only person in this room I trust. If you have a problem with that, the door is open. You can resign." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The rain continued to hammer against the glass. But inside, the storm had broken. Emia looked at Jayden, and then at the room full of powerful people who were suddenly looking at her with respect and fear. She wasn't a ghost anymore. "Shall we get to work?" Emia asked, her voice steady and clear. Jayden pulled out a chair for her, the chair at the head of the table where Evelyn had just sat. "After you," he said. 3 months later. Emia Vance sat in her new office. It was larger than her old apartment. Through the glass walls, she could see the bustling floor of Thorn Dynamics. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her mother. "Dialysis went well. Doctor says my numbers are improving. Thank you, honey. For everything." Emia smiled. She put the phone down and picked up a document from her desk. It was a contract for a new merger. Jayden walked in. He looked different, lighter, younger. The weight of the betrayal had lifted. "Ready to sign?" Jayden asked, leaning against her doorframe. Emia flipped to page 42. She scanned the indemnity clause. She circled a line in red ink. "Page 42, paragraph 4, she said. "The vague wording on intellectual property rights. If we sign this, they keep the patents." Jayden grinned. "I knew there was a reason I hired you." "Don't sign it," she said. "I won't," he replied. "Lunch?" "You're buying," Emia said, standing up. "I think I can afford it." They walked out of the office together, past the security desk, past the golden logo of the company. Emia Vance, the girl who was once invisible, walked side by side with the billionaire, and for the first time in her life, everyone saw her. The waitress had warned the billionaire, and together they had rewritten the ending. Talk about a power move, right? Most people would have just poured the water and kept their head down. But Emia Vance saw something wrong, and she spoke up, even when her voice was shaking. She risked her livelihood to do the right thing, and ended up saving an empire. It makes you wonder, how many times do we stay silent when we should speak? How many page 14s do we miss because we're too afraid to rock the boat? If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, redemption, and the ultimate comeback, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Let me know in the comments. If you were in Emia's shoes, would you have warned him? Or would you have let him sign? I'll see you in the next video.